welcome to CUNY TV Presents COVID-19, a Crisis in Motion, a virtual town hall meeting. I'm Mike Gilliam. This is our third town hall, and this time we're tackling distance learning. The move to distance learning or online instruction began March 19th with no set end date. It's been a massive undertaking for a system offering more than 36,000 courses with more than 15,000 instructors and more than 217,000 students. There have been challenges and successes. Here to delve into all of it, we have the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, Jose Luis Cruz, the Provost of Lehman College, Peter Nwosu, Cathy N. Davidson, the Founding Director of the Futures Initiative at the CUNY Graduate Center, and two students, Kalli Siringas, who attends Hunter College and writes for the student paper, and Zieper, a student at Brooklyn College. She's a student correspondent for the CUNY Office of Academic Affairs newsletter. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
I want to start right off with a message from the Chancellor to the CUNY community on distance learning.
I am so proud and thankful for all you have done in these challenging times, faculty, staff, and students coming together. This is a learning experience for everyone involved, including me. Even though there might be bumps along the way, please keep in mind that we all share one common goal: to get through this semester together, to complete this semester, and to protect your financial aid and your education.
Now, let's start with EVC Cruz. There's an important message there, right?
There is. I think actually there are three different messages from the Chancellor. I think the first one is an acknowledgement of our campus communities and how intentional and deliberate they were in seizing the moment and converting a massive number of in-person courses to online with the objective of ensuring that learning outcomes were met. It's also an acknowledgement from the Chancellor that we will support the campus community to the best of our ability as we face these historical challenges. And then, of course, I think there's also the underlying message that the recovery of the city of New York runs through CUNY. And so it's not only about how we are able to maintain the continuity of our academic programming and the support services to our students that go with that, but also our involvement as thought partners to the city and the state as we move to get away from the current state of affairs into one where we are more prosperous, healthier, and better positioned to serve the peoples of the city of New York.
Mm-hmm. To our students, this is not the year that any of us expected going in. How has this transition to online education worked out for you guys? Kalli?
I think it's been a pretty smooth transition, at least for the media department at Hunter College. I think all of my classes have been smaller and more focused, so it's been kind of a nice personable, I mean, at least it stayed personable even through Zoom calls or Blackboard Ultra. So it's gone pretty well, I would say, for us.
How about you, Sally?
Yeah, thank you. I think, for me, it's been an adjustment, but it's been one that I'm able to deal with. I'm able to do work from home and I'm able to kind of still be able to focus on my classes. I think the experience across the board for students is really diverse, right? Just as diverse as our community. Students are dealing with so many different things at home. So many of our students are also parents or are caretakers. They may be essential workers and they're still working outside the home. They may be grieving for folks that they've lost. So I think, it's hard to generalize at this time when we're all so affected in such profoundly different ways.
Cathy N. Davidson, that's something that you've been kind of looking at, isn't that correct? The fact that our students are dealing with things that may be different than other universities?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's two things. First, 3 months ago, if anyone had said higher education could send all of its students home to keep them safe and still function, nobody would have believed it. So I think this is a huge win for higher education that we've responded so quickly. On the other hand, we have to think about not just our students, but the people in our classrooms who are students and everything that they're having to deal with in their lives. Loss of income, healthcare workers, people who are one of my students is taking care of a mother who has COVID. They're having to take their classes in an incredibly stressful time. My sense is people are doing very well, and I'm especially pleased with how so many faculty are checking in and making sure their students are okay and really asking that question. How are you? How are you faring?
Provost Nwosu, you've been dealing with some of the challenges there at Lehman, both for students and also for the faculty. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Thank you, Mike. I want to re-echo the comments made by the students and my colleagues that we have really done great work. And if you think about the speed with which we moved, this has really been tremendous work on the part of our faculty, our students, staff, and the larger campus community. Think about this in terms of the challenge of moving 80% of instruction to distance learning mode within a 5-day cycle. That was instruction the Chancellor had provided us when he gave the instructional recess. But it wasn't just the challenge of moving that 80% of instruction, but also support services. You have to think of support services. We have had to address admissions, advising, career services, counseling services, disability services. All of these services were services we provided in person, in-house at the college. But certainly we had to think of ways in which we can actually move this as well. It wasn't just the instructional part of the work we do at the institution, but also these services that are equally important for our students to succeed. And so we had to train faculty, we had to train staff, we had to prepare them to move on very quickly to be able to provide the services that our students need, to ensure not only that our students had access and knew how to access Blackboard, the platforms that we've quickly recommended for them to use for instruction, Zoom, WebEx, and the like, but also to make sure that our staff had the equipment to work from home, laptops to work from home, to be able to provide those kinds of services I mentioned that are equally important in ensuring that our students are very successful.
You had to pump some 30,000 laptops and Chromebooks out into the community, correct?
Yes, with the support that we got from the Chancellor and EVC Cruz, we had to really work very hard to ensure that students that didn't really have access, this is the real challenge we face within the community, issues of equity and access, the ability of our students, given the nature of the population we serve. Not every student had laptops. You'll be surprised, not every faculty member had laptops also to teach from home. Not the staff either.
EVC Cruz, what's been the biggest challenge from the top down through all of this?
Well, there have been very many challenges, and many of them have also been opportunities. I think that from a macro perspective, one of the biggest challenges was not only ensuring that we could have as orderly a transition as we could in terms of our instructional offerings, but also from a policy perspective, we had to create several flexible policies to accommodate the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, everything from the tenure clock of faculty that were coming up for tenure, providing extensions to that so that this disruption would not affect their careers. Everything from providing a flexible grading policy that would allow students to choose between getting a letter grade or getting credit or no credit as a means to ensure that they are able to navigate the disruption not only to the courses, but to their own home lives, and still be able to maintain academic momentum. So I think there has been a lot of work that has happened in the last several weeks on just creating short-term policies and bringing up or surfacing best practices that campuses can adopt and adapt as they look to ensuring that the online experience is as best as it can be. So it's been quite a challenge. And then, of course, when you add the CUNY lens, which is a lens of equity and upward mobility, that makes the degrees of freedom associated with each one of these decisions a little bit more complicated, because we do have that responsibility on the equity side to meet.
Mm-hmm. Cathy and Davidson, one of the things that you looked at on all this was like how you were structuring course loads for students and how that had to change just a bit. Talk to us a little bit about that and what you learned.
Yes, well, I teach graduate students, and then my program runs an undergraduate program. And one of the things we did was we asked students how much time they were spending on everyday life in addition to what they were doing in their classes. And one thing we found is faculty tend to underestimate how much they're assigning to students under the best of circumstances. Forget the panic, and the pandemic. So we were really trying to have students help us have an impact, an assessment of how much they actually could do in a week. And then in my classes, I've been having students, I teach a class called Transformative Learning. So students actually used COVID and quickly turned around and used COVID and the city and the issues of equity as the subject of our course. So everyday life became also what they were studying and researching in the class.
EBC Cruz, is there a change in the mindset in education that's actually taking place right now before our eyes?
I think there is. I think that the fact that we were, through very unfortunate circumstances, forced to really dedicate a lot of very intentional time to thinking about how do we take a course that for many years we may have thought would not be one that could be converted to a distance education mode. The fact that we have been forced to think long and hard about that, and I have actually done it, and are on the ground as we speak, having a very large, if you will, laboratory to learn about how to do it well, will bode well for the future as we think about expanding the technical or technological use in teaching modalities, and how it can actually help enhance the learning that occurs in the classroom. And so right now, as we speak, even before the pandemic, the City University of New York had many campuses that were fairly advanced on online teaching. We have one of the top ranked online schools in the country, the School of Professional Studies on the one end. Lehman College, which I had the privilege to serve as president until recently, approximately 47% of the students there take at least one online class per semester. And so we are now seeing that through this effort, the entire campus community or university community is experimenting with this type of online learning, and the lessons that we will learn from that will really shape the world ahead for us.
Is there also now a security issue there as far as like identifying and making sure that whoever is taking a test or whatever is the student that you think is there? You have to deal with that?
Yes, the systems and the platforms we have in place allow us to ensure that the person who is sitting in class is the person sitting in class.
Students, do you have some questions for people here on the panel? How about you, Sally?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to ask, coming off of this issue of disability services, I've been interviewing some students for the Office of Academic Affairs newsletter. And this week I had the opportunity to speak with Saif Alam, who's a student leader in the USS and on campus at John Jay. And he was speaking to me that he's heard from students that accommodations are not being honored for students with disabilities, or communication with professors is inadequate. And he actually said to me that he would recommend that there be a training that's specifically focusing on distance learning and students with disabilities and honoring those accommodations that are requested. So how does the university plan to address this need for additional faculty training?
Thank you, Sally. That's a great question. So as we are now able to sort of pivot towards the summer and beyond, and more intentionally think about the professional development needs of our faculty and staff, that is one of the areas that is gaining particular attention. We're fortunate that we have a very strong disability services core around the university, and we will engage them in ensuring that as we move forward, particularly with a summer that will be all online, that we're better positioned to serve this important community well. I would also say, because it would be responsible for me not to, that any of our students that are eligible for disability services, that were eligible before COVID-19 forced us to move online, if they feel they're not getting the supports they need, I would hope that they would escalate their concerns to either their department chairs, faculty department chairs, or of course the directors of their disability services offices, because we will do everything that we can to make sure that they are taken care of.
How about you, Kalli? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what the contingency plan for the 30,000 laptops and tablets will be now that we know that our summer will also be online. If students can keep the laptops that they have, if they're planning on taking summer classes, or if there'll be a process where they have to give them back and then try to check them out again, or what that'll look like.
That's a great question. We're still working through the logistics. We believe that there's a good chance that the students will be able to keep the laptops through, regardless of whether they plan to enroll in summer sessions or not. We have to wait to see what the demand is. And it may be that we have to recall some of the laptops from students that are not going to be learning or taking courses in the summer, so we can make them available to others. But our plan is to ensure that all students have the equipment they need for those summer classes. The flip side of that, we're also in the process right now of providing professional development to hundreds of the faculty members that are going to be teaching in the summer, so that they can improve upon what they have done during the spring and make sure that it's the best possible experience for our students and our faculty.
And I'll add to that, Michael, very quickly, that on our own campus, part of what we're doing also is at Lehman College, is to provide orientation for students. We assume oftentimes that students as we're providing professional development opportunities for faculty, that students don't need that as well. We've learned, as part of our experience from this, is that we also need to prepare students on how to access Blackboard, how to learn online or through the distance modality. So our number one priority in terms of the 6 things we've identified on our own campus is to provide those opportunities for students as well.
Mm-hmm. Cathy, one of the things you and I spoke of previously was the fact that what we have here is not just simply online education, that there's a distinction to be made. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and explain that?
Sure. I'd like to tell people right now we're doing emergency remote instruction. That's a whole different thing than the very long and important history, decades now, of online education and online learning and teaching. Several people have mentioned the School of Professional Studies, which is a national pioneer in excellent online learning and teaching. The difference is right now, this semester, people were astonishingly, who had never been online, were figuring out how to teach a class online. So I knew people who had never used social media before, faculty who were saying, is there some way I can use this Twitter thing as part of my class and communicate? I mean, people were trying and working very hard, but it was brand new for all of us, even at the same time that we were worried about getting sick. Stores were closing. Some of our students are healthcare workers, or our families are. Our kids were coming home from school. So against every imaginable pressure, people were teaching and students were staying focused. I think that's a miracle. Nobody would have said that was possible in February if you had made some apocalyptic science fiction scenario like this. Everybody at CUNY, no one would have believed it. But now that we have time, we can really think about how can we not only do remote instruction, but how can the learning be as full as possible? I know people, for example, who are doing experiential learning, where people are doing things like working on the census remotely, using what they've learned from online learning to help their local communities do things online. I have people working in churches, getting out the vote, census, and using those as part of classroom learning, as part of experiential learning, and surrounding with all the intellectual work that we have on campus. That's astonishing to me. That's something I think we can learn from, not just in a pandemic and not just online, but for all of education, to make education more democratic, relevant, community-oriented. That's an amazing plus and a big win for everybody if we can do that.
Sally, do you have another question?
Sure. I guess I'm curious, as I've been speaking with students, to the professors and the leaders on this call now, what would you say to a student who's maybe not sure that distance learning is really right for them, or maybe, given this economic crisis that we're living in, maybe they're not even feeling like financially secure enough to even think about returning to school over summer or over the fall?
That's a really good question. And there are many angles that we could approach. I would say that at minimum, we would encourage the student to speak to an advisor, to a trusted advisor or faculty member about this doubt that he or she may have about returning to school. in a all distance learning mode or in person for that matter, given the circumstances in their lives. I would argue that this is probably the best time for our students to stay in school. The economic downturn and the level of unemployment that we're facing is such that our ability of our students to get back on track, gain some academic momentum, and fulfill what they started, which is a shot at a degree, that now is probably the best time to keep the course, and that it is our university's responsibility to make sure that the learning experience that they have moving forward in the summer exceeds the quality of that in the spring, given the disruptions we face, and that the learning experience in the fall exceeds that of the summer. And we're all in this together, and hopefully I think the more of our students that stick to their academic goals, the better off we will be as a city, ultimately, when all things come back to whatever the new normal is.
EVC Cruz, you did touch on something there that I'm sure is like the elephant in the room. You talked about the economy. Are there major concerns about funding now, given the economy?
Yes, there are, and this is true across the United States and all higher ed institutions in general. Clearly, the inability of states and cities to have the tax base, the revenues that they needed, and the expenses associated with COVID-19 are putting a lot of pressure on how much they can provide in funding to various important services and sectors like higher ed. So our university is doing some scenario planning. We're looking at ways in which we can navigate different type of budgetary scenarios moving forward. And to do so, we have developed a series of guiding principles to make sure that at the end of the day, any decision we make, some of them will be hard decisions, of course, are rooted in some specific values around putting students first, living up to our mission of serving as the vehicle of upward mobility for the historically underserved peoples of New York City, living up to our principles of serving as that thought partner I mentioned earlier to ensure that the city can recover as quickly as it can, and perhaps can recover to a state where it's even more equitable than it was in the past. And so, you know, it's going to be a tough ride, but anchored on those values, I think we'll make the best possible decisions, even when the choices are not necessarily all attractive.
Okay. Provost Nwosu, what do you think it's going to look like in the fall?
Well, we are planning, again, not really recognizing what would happen with the pandemic we're all experiencing. And what we are doing on our own campus, of course, guided by the framework that CUNY has provided us, is to move very forward with summer, which is full distance learning modality. And suddenly with fall, to plan along the same direction, mindful that we may or may not return in person, mindful that we are part of a system, and that we, as part of a system, will be guided by the guidance and academic continuity provided by the central office. But we don't want to be caught off guard as we were supposedly during spring. So we have been focusing on planning. And so planning for both summer, but also planning for fall. And encouraging our faculty members, asking them to plan as if you would be instructing and providing services in fall. If things change, then of course we return very much so to in-person instruction and in-person support services.
Okay, EVC Cruz, I'm going to give you the last word here. What's your message to the CUNY community here?
It's a message of gratitude. I am really impressed with the level of effort that our faculty, students, and staff have put into maintaining the viability of this academic semester. We have all witnessed the pain that is engulfing all of New York City and the nation and the world for that matter. And the level of effort that our community has had to put in, given that we have been in the epicenter and the demographics of who we are, has been particularly challenging. We were talking earlier about making sure that our students had a device that they could use to learn. But what we haven't talked about is that many of our students are parents and have kids who are also trying to learn online from home, and perhaps have a spouse, or they themselves are also trying to telecommute to work. And so the level of sacrifice that has gone into making this semester a viable one is incredibly inspiring. And so it's a message of gratitude, a message of hope. We are planning very carefully to make sure that we are even bigger, better, and bolder in the summer and then in the fall, regardless of the backdrop against which we operate. That has been the tradition of CUNY, and that's what's made CUNY the top engine of upward mobility in the country. And so I very much look forward to the hard, important work ahead, and I'm grateful to have the colleagues and the students that we have.
And that will wrap us up. I want to thank all of our guests, the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, Jose Luis Cruz, the Provost of Lehman College, Peter Nwosu, Cathy N. Davidson, the Founding Director of the Futures Initiative at the CUNY Graduate Center, and our two students, Kalli Siringas, who attends Hunter College, and Sally Zieper, a student at Brooklyn College. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us for our CUNY Town Hall, COVID-19, a crisis in motion. I'm Mike Gilliam. Remember, wear your masks, practice social distancing, and stay safe.